Nika, thank you for coming. I really am just trying to thread the needle through time in terms of your life and experiences up to this point. What do you remember of childhood growing up?
I think I constantly felt that growing up in Jos, this sort of unique need to explain why I was such a good Hausa speaker and had a Yoruba name.
The stories we carry don't end when they happen. They echo. They shape how we see the world and who we become. I'm Femi Akonde, and this is Echoes and Parables, where we make sense of the stories we live.
This constant need to explain that my dad is Yoruba, but my mom is from Plateau State. Not in a bad way, just in the way that things work in Nigeria, which is that the expectation is that your name is the language that you speak. And so I think this unlikely love story of my parents marrying because my father came up to work for PNT. He was a mechanical and electrical engineer, and he came up in his 20s to Jos to work. I met my mother in church, and it happened at the time when she had actually just recently broken up with someone that she was engaged to marry. And it was just this really, within days of that, my dad shows up, and I feel this unlikeliness to my story and our family story. And that merger really colors the lives, my life and my siblings' lives in a way that I think was really special, in that we were my father came up, married this woman from the north, learned Hausa from a book, and really became, in many ways, a northerner, merged with her family in this very meaningful way. And in many ways, we were separated from his family. We hardly ever went west, very rarely, usually only around death and loss, but not really in terms of connection. And so really the family that I feel my father embedded himself with and who completely enveloped him and accepted him were my maternal relatives, really were where we found our feet in Plateau State. If I think about my childhood, it's always very much encased in this sort of split from my Yoruba roots in a kind of a real way. Very fluidly, I feel very much like a northerner, and I have this name that is unmistakably Yoruba, and also feel like real affinity to it, but did not know it fully, because I think my father's way of merging in his marriage was kind of to give that up in a way. After my father stopped working for Nitel and PNT, he did a variety of things, but for the most of my childhood, he was working for the missions. Literally, my father can fix anything, from working on complex equipment in the dentist's office to rewiring things that they needed, entire projects he would run. And so it felt like I was in America part of the day and then at home in Nigeria for dinner. Like, crossing of borders is, I think, the theme that comes up for me. I'm constantly crossing borders. This idea that when my parents got married in the 70s, they got married in 1976, it was really an unusual mix for a Yoruba man to marry a Plateau woman. And so in primary school, I could experience these real expressions of surprise that I didn't have parents that were both from Plateau State. My father was not married to a Yoruba woman. It's less common now. I think people pay very little attention to that. Memories of my childhood is, and in family lore, is my very early obsession with school. Stories are told of me being awake and dressed on a Sunday and being upset that there was no school. It doesn't surprise me. It does not surprise me that there's memory like that. I was very comfortable in school. I think certainly very independent, but I think also just a lover of school. It was like the place I wanted to be. And I think there was, in our family, certainly real enthusiasm for that, real sacrifice so that we could go to these schools that I think often was really a financial stretch for our family. I think my father really felt strongly that he wanted us to really be immersed and engaged intellectually. I grew up at least my earliest memories were in low cost in Nigeria, and we had these great neighbors that we would spend all this time with, and across the street was Mama Chiboy and her kids. And I famously remember that she loved musicals. So we would cross over and we would spend Sundays there or whatever. But I remember watching King and I and Sound of Music for the first time in her home. And so I have these very pleasant memories early on, but also because I'm the oldest, really have memories of these real financial ups and downs that my families have, more so than my siblings, I think. And so I see these real moments of like tension where, you know, I couldn't go to school because my parents were struggling to pay school fees and we would have to stay out. And then there were real moments also when I think that there were resources and there was support from my family through the mission for me to be in these schools with arguably probably the wealthiest individuals in the country. And so I'm feeling as I'm talking to you this sort of theme of crossing these borders of not only religion and ethnicity, but also class and nation. Like my whole life, you know, later I end up in Kenya for undergrad and then end up in the US for graduate school. And I just feel like my life has been one of just this transversing of borders.
It's really interesting that it's almost a case of that whole dichotomy just started with your parents joining. It feels like that just started a whole circle of splits in the system. You mentioned the low-cost housing in Jos that was essentially built for supposedly low-income people in society. When you look back, do you get a sense that there was a strain to that?
Yeah, I think even this idea of what low cost is a really good example to be the first starter homes for civil servants. My mom was a nurse in youth. My father worked for a PNT, I think, which then became NITEL. Like these, in many ways, white collar, definitely not solidly middle class yet. And so this is a boost from the government to get you to start your own home. And so already you see this question of these borders being positive and also showing challenge. I think that every part of me can see now, reflecting back, this real ways in which transversing of borders and differences has really prepared me for the life that I live right now. If I can drop a suitcase somewhere, I know how to make it my own. I feel like I'm not a stranger to place because place has never been how I've defined who I am. It's certainly not the way that my parents have defined themselves. My father really transversed an entire country to now grow a family in a place that was not the land of his birth and found a way to really build an expansive life. And so I see ways in which there was real richness in that and ways in which that there were real challenge in that, because for my dad to do that, I think he did have to lose, in some sense, his own family. It wasn't explicitly stated, Femi, that my paternal family members were not on board with him marrying a woman from the north. And there wasn't explicit statements that I knew, but there was this sense that that was the case. There was the sense that there wasn't joy and happiness, that this was what he chose. And I think that things that happened later, in many ways, I think even further alienated him from his side of the family. One example is my father's brother dying and him really not finding out about it until my maternal grandfather read about it in the paper. That he did not know that his brother was sick. He did not know that his brother died. And this was, you know, a time when people could call. And my father was, of course, really devastated. But there was this real fissure. This thing that I see as a start for me and my identity meant that there was some loss on the part of my father of his own family, which was complicated in many ways. His father was polygamous and had multiple wives. And so there were this already splits in his family. I think my father was very determined to build something different for his life and for his family, which is to really build this family unit. And I saw my father really, and of course my mother too, really focus on this idea that we spend time, that we are intentional about family, that we are intentional about spending time together and doing things as a family.
Yeah. Did you sense any reactions on your mom's side? Because obviously it would mean that she was the reason for him essentially separating or losing that side of his legacy actively.
I think yes. It's very rare that things are explicitly stated. I think I just saw the kinds of reactions and anxieties that would come up related to maybe visits from my father's side of the family. Like, it felt very different from the way that my mother's relatives would feel in my house. There was a real stark difference. And as a child, I locked in and coded it. Did I understand it? No. But I think I felt the tensions. But I don't have a family where I think my mom would sit down and say, here are the tensions and concerns. The older we got, I think I heard more explicit things. Yeah. But I think if my mom, and I'm sure of this, I think if my mom lived, let's say my dad married her and we moved to Ibadan, which is the area that his family was from, I think my mom's experiences would have been totally different if she were there. My maternal grandparents were my father's parents, in a sense. The closeness was so clear. There was something really special about how he was enveloped in that family and how he allowed himself to be enveloped in this family. He was completely embraced in Plateau in a way that I think growing up, there was quite a bit of movement. My maternal grandparents were solid and kind and situated and loving and open and very much embraced him as a son because they only had one daughter. So they were very happy and, of course, adored their grandchildren to no end. And so there was this way in which they were the patriarch and the matriarch of the family in a way that I think that my father really thrived to have. I think that his choices really shaped our family. In fact, the reason why I think he eventually left his job with Nitel, which was secure and lucrative, was because they were going to post him somewhere in the East, I don't know where, and it was absolutely important to my father that he did not situate himself any place away from his family. And so he lost this job, and that actually initiated many, many years of financial suffering after that. But he made this decision primarily so that he would not be separated from his family. He was absolutely intent on always being one unit, even if I think it meant that we struggled for periods. Yeah.
Do you sense that as kids, you guys were able to, in terms of your experience of what life was growing up, was there an environment where you felt confident to talk?
I would say that I don't have, especially for me, because I think, and I've been thinking about this a lot, mainly because I had a conversation the other day that made me think about it, is that I actually have quite a bit of a voice in my family, and as the oldest daughter, I actually feel like I was behind the curtain more often than I would like, actually. I knew a lot more about the inner workings of my family and of my parents than probably the rest of my siblings did. I just have this feeling of knowing how things were and how my parents felt about that, but I can't remember conversations told to me. I know I didn't intuit this, so maybe I overheard conversations, and maybe I was told, honestly, and I wouldn't be surprised if I were, because I do know that my parents have this practice of bringing you in and informing you of things. Here's what's happening, and here's what we're going to do. And often I was the one who was called in to be informed of these things, good or bad, kind of like in this family meeting style. But I think I just have this sense of knowing.
Did you ever feel a bit overwhelmed by it all?
I think it's a lot to know what your parents are dealing with when you cannot do anything about it. Especially as a child, to be plugged in to the financial constraints of your family, that's a really difficult thing. And you're doing that while I have this memory of, we're living on Ring Road at the time, and I was in this private school. I was in maybe class 1 at the time, and we were going through a rough time. My father, I think, had no income at that time. My mom was the only income. She was working in Juth, and she worked there all through my childhood until retirement. And that was for a time the only income that we had. And she at that point, I don't think was like a matron or anything like that. I don't believe that she was making much. I don't know the details of that. But what I do know is that things were tight enough that we could not go to school. I cannot tell you what that did to me. I was really upset about it. And I remember knowing that my mom was going to go to the school to talk to Mrs. Bali, who owned the school, to allow us to go while they figured out payment. And so I actually have this memory because we were walking distance from the school, my mom walking across the bridge, and my neighbor asking me, oh, where's your mother going? And me in my innocence, because I was 6 or 7, I'm like, oh, she's going to talk to the principal to beg to see if we can get to school. My father later was like, oh, what was Mama so-and-so asking you about? And I was like, well, she was asking me where Mom was going. And my dad was like, what did you say? And I was like, oh, I said Mom was going to go beg Mrs. Bali so we could go back to school. And I will never forget what my dad's face did. He was upset with me, like upset with me. And so there was this real realization that I had done something wrong, that there's something actually really shameful about what we were going through. And so to be that young, right, to be contending with what it means to not have, we had to wear these uniforms. You remember the Cortina shoes?
Yeah.
I was very aware that there were students in the school who would have brand new ones, and we could only really afford the knockoffs. Like my shoes never really looked like theirs, which were shiny and nicely brown, and clearly the ones you get when you go to the actual store. And my uniform had to be sewn by the lady down the street.
Oh.
We didn't buy the uniform that was sold from the school store, which looks very different. I was very aware of not having, but also learning that there were things I probably shouldn't say to people about our condition. You know what I mean? That was a difficult lesson for me. And I think to know that I was aware of that, but then you have to now learn these layers of what you can say and not say. And all that is happening as you're trying to make sense of your world as a 6-7-year-old. Like that's not old enough to carry all of this. And so when I'm looking retrospectively and I'm looking at my child right now, I'm like, oh, I was really young to carry all of this stuff and to know it. But I did know it and I did carry it. And I think my parents shielded us to the degree that they could. Like it was there that I could not have the things that other people could have. I think there's real pain often in knowing the underbelly of your family's struggles. But I also have come to realize the kind of ways that it has taught me to not necessarily have the state of affairs really. Of course it matters whether you can pay your bills. I think that I have this experience of my family always being my family, whether we were living in this literally, what do they call it in Nigeria? Chiki de palo, meaning just like living room and bedroom. My father constructed bunk beds where me and my brother were up and him and were down. You know what I mean? Like we're literally all in the same room and we were sharing a bathroom and sharing a kitchen with our neighbors. And looking back, I'm like, how did we do that for years and years and years? That was actually a real struggle. And then to be in an experience later where there was a little bit more and we had all this space and I had my own room, like same family, different financial circumstances. And it was really the same family. This idea of keeping your family core regardless of what's happening, whether you have or you don't have. I think I learned that lesson very early. And so I'm not really afraid about whether I lack things. I have come not to worry so much about the patina of wealth or having things because I don't think it fundamentally, what I've learned is that it matters. What matters to me is that even in that time, we were able to build memories. My father would take us, it was all happening in Ring Road. There was this bridge and there was this water source. And on Sunday, he'd be like, let's go for a swim. We'd literally go on these family swimming picnics and my father would fling us in the water and we'd have a really good time. It wasn't a fancy vacation. We were not able to fly anywhere, but I was having these moments of family connection that I can think back to, I've always had this experience of dad being dad and us having this very sort of informal interaction. I think a lot of it had to do probably with his experience in the mission and feeling like there's this informality that he saw Americans and Europeans have with their children that he wanted to inculcate. And he was really intentional in those ways. And yes, there was all these up and downs financially, but my family was always my family. That connection that we had and the way we exist, no matter what we were like, even if it were threadbare clothes that we were wearing, they were clean and they were ironed and we were showered and we were oiled. In many ways, I felt very cared for, regardless of whether my parents had at the time or did not have. And that still remains the case.
Tell me, in terms of your relationship with your siblings, how did the whole dynamic run through for you guys growing up?
Yeah. So I know you know this, but maybe your listeners won't, but I am the oldest of 5. And so I have one brother who is a year younger than me, Kunle. I have a sister, Shola, who's 2 years younger than me. I have a sister, Kemi, who's 3 years younger than me. And then Toi brings up the rear. And that's an 8-year difference between me and her. Shola and Kemi have sickle cell anemia. And that really did shape my childhood significantly because they were very sickly. And I think my parents were both working parents. They had these 2 sickly kids who were a year apart, like they were born back to back, and were almost sick monthly when they were younger. And so my parents made the decision that Shola would go to my maternal grandparents. And actually Shola, until her teens, was with my maternal grandparents. She was much sicker than Kemi was as a child. My grandfather was the commissioner for the Teachers Service Board. And so at least when she was growing up, was really well resourced. He was living in government housing. They were very comfortable. And so she was able to, in many ways, be cared for like an only child, and they could focus on her diet, they could focus on her health, they could focus on her appointments in a way, and then my parents could contend with the rest of the 4 of us. I think my sibling relationships have morphed and changed in many ways as we grew up. My brother and I are a year apart, and we were at war for most of the first 10 years. And then we got very, very close. And my sisters who were younger, and that's the 3 of them, 2 of them being really sickly, I was mainly in the role of either caretaking or passing through as they couldn't do things I could do. I think this is the thing with being a sibling, right? Of someone who can't exercise, is occasionally really debilitated by their illness, and you are well and your life is sort of going, and you have to walk past their bedrooms as they cry in pain while you go off to do your things, and then you come back to that and you offer what you can. And so in terms of like knowing them as people, that did not happen really until probably into my late teens and into young adulthood, honestly, where they became actual people to me. Like even physically, they were much smaller than me, if that makes sense. Like they looked, until maybe they were 12, 13, 14, looked 7 because of what sickle cell does. They were grossly underweight, really hard for them to gain weight, so they were very small and looked very young. And I think just developmentally, because I was sort of growing at the rate that you would expect, I just felt very different from them and did not feel much in the way of connection, except to be very aware that they were suffering in ways that I could do nothing about, really. That's the real injustice of sickle cell, isn't it? There is pain management, which is often really ineffective, and you just have to watch them struggle through debilitating pain over and over again for your entire childhood. So the degree to which we can, as a family, unpack the psychology of that, I don't know how to. That was a fixture in our family. If they are well, then we are functioning in this way. If they are sick, then we are functioning in this way. And it was in our childhood very much this real mood in our home of, are my sisters well or are they not? And immediately that changes everything that we do. It changes how my parents look, their worry, really serious illness where it's scary for all of us. And we've had many moments like that, too many to count. And so as they grew, fortunately, which tends to be the case, which is as you get older, you have less crises, but then the crises can be really intense when they do show up. And that has boded for them, which is they can have years-long stability and not much illness, and then they will have something seriously. They are now on these maintenance meds that have since been approved that have helped them, both of them. And so are we still in the space of are they well or are they sick? Yes. It feels different right now because they are adult women who now really engage with their health more actively. It's not us as a family making decisions about them, but them really making these choices about their health. And it's been really, I think it's been beautiful to see how they have come into their own and they manage their illnesses very differently. They have been, in many ways, the core of our family. What has really shifted in my understanding of and their lives with sickle cell is how they have moved very much from us needing to caretake them and them actually being irreplaceable fixtures of our family. Like Shola is a tremendous cook and baker, the quintessential planner. And Kemi is, of course, a purporter and just very talented writer and thinker. And she has a very direct, unapologetic personality. And it's just been really, I think for me as their older sister, such a gift to see them be able to take agency of their lives from this disease that is in many ways something that's beyond their control. You don't know when you're going to lose 3 weeks to this illness. You cannot control where it's going to hit you. Is it chest? Is it elbow? Is it leg? You don't know. And so they've learned how to live in the moment and not live in fear of it, to take back some control of their lives from this. There's immense pain and suffering living with sickle cell anemia. And I think as children, they were powerless to it, didn't have much control, and succumbing to it when it took over in a way that I think feels very different from how I see them engage with it today. And so my relationship with them now is that people who, you know, are not necessarily, I don't want to use the word necessarily helpless because I don't think that's what they were even as children. It's my memory of that. But I think very much, these now young middle-aged women, I guess I would call them, who are kind, talented, driven, ambitious, hopeful, and they have found a way to thrive in the face of that in a way that has been really inspiring to watch as an adult, to watch my siblings live like that. I've come to just be in awe of that for them because I watch their lives. I see the things that they do, the high quality of what they produce, the ways that they love, the ways that they are thoughtful about what my parents need. They are very focused and fully living their lives in a way that if you asked me if I thought that they would be, I don't know. So I am so grateful that this is where they are at, and I'm very proud of them because there isn't a way that I can understand the inner resilience that can bring this about, but it's so there for them. It's so there for them in a way that I think as a family we are all changed by.
Do you feel it just with you having that real presence of such a debilitating thing, how did that affect your idea of closeness to them? Did you just essentially have to compartmentalize your emotions in terms of what was happening to them, like different from how typical siblings would be?
I don't know if it was compartmentalization, but it has to be because I think even as a child, if you let in what your siblings are feeling and experiencing, like really let it in, if I actually absorbed what was happening to them or what could happen to them, I don't know that I could function. I don't think that we all as a family could. I think what sickle cell anemia, like for you to be able to contend with this condition in your life, I think requires some level of compartmentalization. It has to. I can't say that it was intentionally mean saying, oh, I'm getting them sick at home and they're so sick. I'm walking out of the hospital and she's connected to a million tubes and somehow I have to go and do X, go study or do something. Or not even be in the country, which has been my experience most of the time of their most scariest experiences. I have not been present, honestly. I've just been getting daily reports of what's been happening, and that's its own special hell. But yes, I think you're right. I think there was some level of compartmentalization that we all had to engage in to survive. I think also the fact that my mom was in medicine and was a nurse brought this feeling of, okay, there's an extra layer of knowledge in the house that somebody who can administer an injection to bring about some ease. Somebody who knows when it's bad enough to go to the hospital. And my mom, I don't know if you've met my mom, but she is calm. She is calm embodied. Doesn't speak above a whisper, is very composed, and is even more so when things like my mom's medical background, her temperament, her knowledge. And also, I say my sister's personalities clearly have something to do with how we managed as a family and how they managed, because they had to be, like, I'm often rarely not wanting to think about this, but to think about a childhood, you have to opt out of a lot of things. I think when I think about it, my heart breaks over and over for them to be a child and not. Like, there were many things physically that they just were not able to do. There was not a tree I did not climb. There was not a rock that did not have my name on it. And I know my sisters did not have that experience. Bodies did not allow for that and disappointed them over and over again. I am thinking about this question you asked about compartmentalizing it, because even as I talk to you, I feel like I'm to the feelings I don't usually allow myself to hit with them, because it's a really scary place to go. Because we live this. Sickle cell is a lifelong condition. There is no cure. And so there's no talking about this in the past tense. It is very much their lived experience today as adult women, because it's just too scary. It's painful. Yeah. It's in many ways like locking into the unspoken fear, this unspoken fear that there's an ultimate price to be paid to this condition that I don't want them to ever have to pay. And that they are here, that they are living and happy is a gift. And we live that way. I have a lot of gratitude as a family, because there's a lot of odds beating. Beat a lot of odds both in their late 40s and on all accounts thriving and doing the things they need to be healthy. There's every part of me is praying that now that there's some research, I'm like, somebody just needs to pay attention to sickle cell anemia. I think if there was real money and attention, and that the people who are affected are the world's important, my sisters would not have suffered this long. And we would not have lost a lot of people in our lives that we've lost. And so I have real feelings about the disparity around this, and real impatience too.
Do you feel like there were times when this then went to how you were relating outside the house? Were you pulling in support from your relationships that were beyond your family?
I would have to say no. I think there's a way in which our village around supporting my sisters was small and predictable and not deep and wide. And so this idea of what translates, I think I have ended up in this role where I am an active problem solver for other people's and pains. And I'm not myself very good at bringing my own vulnerability to other people. It's a thing that I have to work on. I think it wasn't this thing where there was a revolving door of people in and out of the house. I think only when they were very sick did it go beyond us as a nuclear family. I think we managed it very, very close. I think we protected their peace and their space as much as possible. But I think Jos in itself is that if you send a beacon out, people are going to show up. They're going to be concerned. And I think when you have two family members who have sickle cell, it could be this situation where you are constantly, you're going to burn people out. Because this is, like I said, them growing up, it was a weekly, monthly affair that they would be in crisis. And you cannot call people every month for an entire childhood. And so it would be when things hit 100 that maybe you would see the village show up. And I think for me, and maybe I'm thinking about this now because you asked this question, I think for me, before I send the beacons out, I think I've learned that we need to be at boiling point, but everything else we can manage, because I think that's how we managed it as a family, honestly, is that we titrate. And things are bad, but we can manage them. And maybe other people at that point would and running crazy. But I think what we learned is to sit in the discomfort of things that would really roil a lot of other people in terms of illness. We had to build that because of what was asked of all of us, including my sisters. They have a really high threshold for pain. And when they start to complain, it's an 8. But I have no illusions that my sisters live with 0 pain. And I think all of us as a family had to do a variation of that. And so maybe what I'm seeing in my life is that calibration that we've all had to learn. Honestly, before I call somebody Femi, I swear, it's not intuitive, and it's not. I just happen to be right now in a relationship where the person that I went through will not allow me to suffer in silence. It's honestly a reprogramming in a way. I'm getting clear on this as I talk to you about this, but if you think about growing up in a family where it's so clear that you have 2 sisters who have real needs, you come in the house and you can hear their cries from the front doorway. It puts in perspective very quickly that whatever it is that you're dealing with out there is not a thing. I think you are immediately perspective taking as you walk in the door about what constitutes life problem. And so coming to my parents, before I come to them with something, it has to be an actual concern, because we have people in our very lives who we are contending with real pain and real suffering.
How did this affect your regular friendships? I'm just imagining a typical friendship where you're sharing. Did this mean that there were just no-go area topics for you that you would be keeping away from your day-to-day?
Yeah, I didn't talk about it much, to be honest. I really didn't. And maybe, Saratu, who was probably my oldest friend at this point, might hear a thing or two here and there about my sisters being ill. But that's because of proximity and consistency. She's there, and so she would maybe know. And maybe it's this compartmentalization that you speak of. There's not a thing that they can do about it. You know what I mean? And there's not a thing that can change it. And I think when you grow up in that space, you just learn to be, when you're out in the world, like,
wow.
You just do the world. And then when you get back home, you get to the business of caring for them if they need that. And in many ways, blocking it so you can function. I think part of survival, actually, I'm realizing, is separating that. Hillcrest was really about possibility. Many of us had never been, I had not been a day outside the country, and I was constantly thinking about this country and these nations that everybody from that sounded so big, and all these places that I dreamt of and wanted to be a possibility. And I think to invite my sisters into that would have brought me down to earth like this. So in many ways, I think there's an oversimplification what it was in educational life and my preparation for what I'm doing right now. But I think it was in many ways an escape too.
So you then finished from Hillcrest because now it's time to physically move ahead. How did all that affect your sense of place, especially knowing what you were leaving behind and what those conditions were?
Yeah. Oh. I think at first went to undergrad, as I mentioned earlier, in Kenya. And I think it was in many ways a compromise with my family, my father, about staying on the continent, because actually my preference would have been at that point to go to the US. And so the compromise was, at least you are on the continent, you are in American school in Kenya. I think it was a good decision. There was a part of me that needed that relative closeness to them in the first few years of undergrad. I think it was substantial because of the timing, and this was the mid-90s, and yes, there was a phone in the dorm, but it wasn't like I was daily talking to my parents. It's probably the first time where there was not daily connection with them. And it was maybe the first time to experience my life and experience myself without my family, and particularly without contending with this constant cycle of illness, wellness that my sisters were in. And of course, if they were ill, I would hear about it still, you know, I would get the updates from my family. But there was this, in your words, this ultimate escape, this ultimate separation from it all, and to, in many ways, have real compartmentalization, like this new place that did not have any of the memories or connections. And so it was a substantial shift, not displacement. I have a fixed role in my family as the oldest daughter that has not changed. I think because of where all my siblings were when I first was in college, which is that they themselves were in secondary school, I think it was a time of relative wellness. Sisters, there was this time of real quiet, I feel, and it was during my undergrad years. But then I come back after 3 years and I do a year of NYSC and I'm sort of embedded again. And I think that was really important because after I had graduated with some sense of self, having Kenya for a while, having crossed borders and really thought about myself and what mattered to me and what I wanted to do next. Maybe it's my personality or my way of being. I think I have come to really embrace the role I have in my family, which is the one who was behind the curtain, which is that there is this way that I'm invited in with my parents in problem solving that has kept me very connected to my family. I'm not in danger of estrangement, even though I live an ocean away, because I feel like I am relied upon and I am included and I am asked and I think maybe the right word is consulted consistently about the kinds of things that matter to my family. Of course, the timing of that can land at a time when I'm overwhelmed and I don't have space and I don't actually know what to do. But I think what also offers me is this real stability in my family, role, my value of their trust in me to offer something when I'm asked, but also as the holder of family history. But I think that what that has done is that a lot of things are in my head about my family. And I think a lot of my style of thinking and problem solving is a real match for my family, and it tends to be helpful. I feel just as close to my family now as I've always, even though I have now lived in the US. I was 24 when I got here. I have now lived here 25 years. Been here 1 year longer than the years I spent in Nigeria and Kenya combined. And so, yeah, so now this is the place that I've lived the longest, and to be able to say that the family chat has no cobwebs is really important to me. We are constantly in contact. And I know generally what's happening, and I feel really involved, and I have made an effort to go home annually so I can, my son can be a part of my family's lives. I feel that there was a shift early on that was necessary because I think I needed to differentiate a little bit, if that makes sense. I see it that way in retrospect. What Kenya was an opportunity a little bit to come into my own and then make my way back home. Yes.
So there's ambition in terms of you finding your self-expression, finding your feet, establishing yourself. Is there a sense of leaving anything behind? And when I say that, I don't just even mean location-wise. It's your family and your siblings.
Yeah, I feel that every time I'm back in Nigeria and my parents live in Abuja now. And so there really is this sense of loss because I've not been back in Jos since my sister got married. I think that was 2017. And so every time I'm home, I feel like I'm not home. Jos, the place that I was born, this city where I grew up and found my friends and found myself and found curiosity and beauty. That place doesn't exist in many ways. And so there is this sense always that when I go home that I'm trying to recapture that feeling of home, that smell, when you can smell the rain in Jos, smells like no other. Just sights and sounds of my childhood, of these streets in Jos that sound a particular way. My grandparents and their home and how I felt there, that, they're both no longer living. And so, yes, I feel like there's something that I have lost by leaving, but also because with leaving means things change. And when you come back, you essentially come back to a different place. And Nigeria, it's never the same country. You come back and there is so much dynamism, and that's good, but also in many ways like disorienting. There is new culture, new music, new ways that people dress, new ways in which they party. So yes, I mourn that. I really do, because I think I've been trying to go back to a feeling and a place and a time that I know is gone. And so yes, there is real loss that I feel.
So let's talk about how you essentially evolved away from home in your sojourn through time, with people, with yourself.
I think I've pointed out this theme of feeling like I grew up crossing these borders of ethnicity and faith and country and now nation. And you talk about compartmentalization, I could be one thing or another. And if I'm talking about, and there's still more growing to do, I think you will understand that because we're solidly middle-aged and there's this feeling of transformation and transition, is I think how I've evolved away from home is really by becoming a straddler of things. I kind of think about myself as transnational. There are aspects of living in the United States that I became a mother here. There's a way that being a mother in a country roots you in that country because this is the place that your child has their first memory and where they grow and where you find community. And so there are aspects of this cultural experience that I feel I have really internalized and embraced. And there are parts of my native land and my native memory, that many of which I've talked to today, that I absolutely cannot cut myself from. It's literally my blood across the ocean, my entire family. And so I think I've learned to figure out a way to be both and, to straddle. Like in psychology, we talk about dialectics, which is that two things can be true at one time. I can very much find my place in America and still be very deeply connected to my family and my home in a way that is still really real. It's not either or, it's both and. Those two things are true. I can be aware that there is possibility that my sisters are not going to be well tomorrow and they are well today and thriving, and I can live with those two tensions. I think I've learned to be multiple things at once and to let all my parts be present. This idea that I can either be escaping or very much in the reality of my family, I don't think that's how I live anymore. I think what I've evolved into, and I think this is this journey of, I think as you get older, getting tired of having to shapeshift. I think I'm tired of shapeshifting. I think if I'm telling you of my general exhaustion, and part of the work that I've done in my 40s is this idea that I cannot be everything to everybody. And it's okay if some people do not agree with my decisions. I really cannot please everybody. And I think part of the gendered experience of growing up girl in Nigeria is trying to please everybody. It's trying to do the thing that's right, or the thing that's palatable, or the things that people say are the things to do. And I think you live like that and you are compartmentalized from yourself, because then you are not connected to your own needs, your own hopes, your own desires, your own loves, right? Your own pains even. And then occasionally you have the experience of being patted on the back and told that you're a good daughter or you're a good girl. And I think becoming a mother makes it very clear to you. You want your child to experience you, not some shapeshifter version of you. Like, who is your child loving if not you? What am I teaching him if it's not coming from a place of authenticity? I am very much internalizing America, and I am Nigerian. I am a mother and a daughter, a sister, and I'm a friend. And all of these roles as we grow up just continually expand. And we cannot be everything to everybody, but we are, all those things are parts of ourselves, and something is louder in any moment than another. Like right now, friendship is loud because you are in the room. And so there are parts of myself that I can bring to this that are not always on, and I always appreciate when I have a moment for a part of me that I feel is more awake than it usually is.
Yeah.
So I think I have evolved into being able to be okay with the tensions of multiple truths, with multiple things being true at once. And I think given the childhood experiences that I've explained to you, I think that is in many ways a new way of coping, because I can't judge that younger version of me for what she was doing, because I think that's all she had. I can, right now, knowing what I know and having the years that I have under my belt, just come into my own right now and be doing the thing that is in my capacity to do right now, which is something different. I think it's something more authentic, something more lived, something more honest in terms of how I even engage with my sisters right now around their illness. I think it feels very different. It feels less implicit and more explicit. How are you? What do you need? What are you worried about? And so it's morphed into something a little bit more interpersonal.
So it's curious, in your description of yourself, you mentioned daughter, mother, friend. There's the obvious ones, like wife, that you haven't mentioned.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
I think I didn't say that because I'm not a wife now to anybody. I think one of my evolutions in the last decade really was in many ways the unraveling of my marriage, which is in itself a process of identity. And so I think that has been, other than this fixed childhood experience of having sisters who were consistently ill and struggling as a shaper of me, I think I would say this experience of separating and then divorcing from my husband has also been another real fissure for me. I'm going to actually rethink that and back up. I think that there is some level of my relationship with Kemi and Shola and their illness being actually less about me and more about the family core and of course about my relationship with them. The failure of my marriage, I think, felt a lot like it felt like an inner conflict with myself. Feeling of real failure, of real disappointment, real distrust of myself and my decision making. And you can tell that I'm actually even yet still struggling to describe what that meant in terms of my current evolution. I'm not super close to it. It's been 6 years that I've been divorced. It's remote enough that I think that there is some perspective on it, because there's just something about how I've always imagined that my life was going to go, that it is not going. This is in many ways a crisis of me having this experience of failing at something significant. And in my mind, I don't fail at things. And so it's really hard to think about that. Is it the right decision? Absolutely. I'm sure of that. Was it an easy decision? Absolutely not. I think if I were following the template, especially if I'm thinking about the expectations that were not explicitly said to me, but I have internalized about what it means to be in a marriage and to work at a marriage, then my decision is not necessarily in alignment with that. And so I had to do something, which is to step out of that and make a decision that did not feel aligned with what would be considered good girl behavior. Like, you don't leave a marriage if you are working at a marriage. You stay, and you stay for the kids, and you make it work, and you are long suffering, and you are forgiving. And I think I was really struggling with the long suffering and forgiving part, like why that is the rule. And I couldn't ultimately find anyone who would give me an answer for why that was the expectation.
You stated, was it the right decision? And you're absolutely clear that it was.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that you came about being that certain?
I think it had to do with how I felt after the fact, Femi. There's no part of me that did or still wanted to cause pain to my partner. He still very much remains a devoted father and to our child, and we co-parent generally well and always have. And that was the difficulty, part of the difficulty of this. But what I felt after the fact consistently was relief, not ambivalence, not regrets, not missing, just relief. There's a part of me that really wants to protect our decision to co-parent our child in the way that we want. And I do want to preserve my own child's experience of his father, and I don't want to color that at all. And so if it feels big, it's for that reason, because I think that there's a way in which my marriage to him might not have worked, and his relationship with his son is completely separate from that in many ways. I would want my relationship with my son to grow and to flourish without his finger being on the scale, because he deserves to have a relationship that I don't impact. And what I felt after the end of our marriage was relief. And I think there was a part of me after being with someone for close to 2 decades that felt that if I step out of this, I'm going to have a bunch of feelings that might include maybe regretting, maybe second guessing, maybe wondering if there was, like, I thought, okay, separating is actually going to give me some clarity. And there's been one feeling consistently, and that has been relief. And it wasn't for lack of trying. We just could not. And so I think I had to be the one to call it. And it's hard to be the one to call it. And I'm not usually assertive in that way, especially if it's a call that I think is going to bring about hurt and disruption. I think our son was 5, 6 at the time. Like, it wasn't just disrupting my life, it was disrupting his life and our son's life as well. And it's really hard to be the initiator of that and to be the person who looks like the one who left, who was the one who gave up. And I'm okay with that. I think the people-pleasing part of me was not okay with that. The people-pleasing part of me wanted to be like, hey, you don't understand. I tried, and you don't have the underbelly. And I think in the beginning, I actually felt real urgency in defending my position. I think anybody who's been in a relationship understands that the only 2 people who know the relationship are the 2 people who are in it. And it is complex, and it is mixed. And there's a lot of things going on. And I actually did not owe anybody an explanation. The only person who needed to understand my position, and who I think understands my position and why our marriage was not working, is him, is my ex-husband, in some real depth. I think I've been able to articulate it in relationships that I have right now, and trusting with my current partner. I think that there's been enough trust that I've been able to articulate some of the real issues with my marriage. But that has taken me time and trust to be able to articulate that. But I think that for me, it was really hard to be the one viewed as the walking away one, the one who gave up, the one who caused the disruption. I was told openly at the point that I made the decision that I did not know what a bad husband was. Told that to my face in a way that was hurtful. It was really hurtful to hear that because it felt invalidated, and I felt like a lot of the time when I was trying to plead my position, it's you, these, young girls with champagne problems. This is not a marital problem. Like, what are you talking about exactly? When we're talking about long suffering, the problems that you are listing right now do not rise to that. And my evolution in that is not to necessarily prove my position anymore. I think I am now clear, especially because I'm in a new relationship that feels very different, that feels... And I don't think it's because my ex-husband did not care about our marriage or did not work at it. I think that there was this real misalignment in how we fixed things. We could not find a way to communicate about them, and that was the exasperation. I think if we could have done that, maybe things would have been different, but we could not. And we are consistently misaligned, and my hope for him is that he finds somebody for whom there is that alignment. My decision, I feel, is one in which I have peace about, and that is only confirmed, especially in my new relationship, in terms of the kinds of energy that I want to have with somebody, the ways in which I want to listen and be listened to, the way I want to problem solve, the way I want to be validated, the way that I love. And so we continue to co-parent, and I think it's its own success, actually. This idea that you can come out of a marriage that did not work out, where there are all these residual feelings, and they are painful and they are messy, and you can still both love this child that you share. I am so grateful for that we can show up to that with some semblance of maturity most of the time. Is tremendous. He is going to be in my life for the rest of my life because we have this human that we co-created, that we love more than anything. So there's complexity there, but I think the general feeling I have is that we are co-parenting successfully, and my optimistic part tells me that that will only get better as he gets older, that we can find a way, because we still remain connected and we're a family. We have co-created a child. And so this is a growing experience for me as well. There's this idea of having some sort of connection and unit with him as co-parents of our son, and wishing him well and wanting nothing but happiness for him, because he is always going to stay connected to me.
Do you, just because you obviously had, in the way that you've talked about your parents, with admiration for them, do you often do that comparative thing where you're thinking the path your parents walked versus the one that you have walked with your ex-husband?
Yeah, I do, because they are now married 50 years. And that's not anything I think is going to be in the cards for me at this point. So there's something really special about having the wife of your youth grow old with you, and they were in their early 20s when they met and got married and built up on all accounts in lockstep, and only growing. I've seen them sort of morph and become empty nesters and now grandparents. There's something really beautiful about their story, and I think, if I'm being honest, that's one of the things that felt like would be success for me as the oldest daughter, as the good daughter, is that you end up marrying a husband in your youth and you grow old with him and there's no interruption. You work at it and it's successful. It's a successful marriage. So yes, there's comparison. I would have really wanted what my parents have, is this one person. And that's not going to be. I think I am creating a path that's not theirs. And I have to, in many ways, reconcile my own sense of myself to that. And I'm clearly in the early stages of making sense of that. I appreciate your questions, Femi, because I think in many ways, I'm not often, like I said, I stopped many years ago trying to explain my position. And so I'm not usually offering conversations. And I, of course, preserve the delicate, fragile piece in my relationship with my ex-husband. And so I think I'm being intentional often about staying in this space. Here's where I am. And so articulating it is helpful because it feels like there is some method to them. It feels messy and maddening.
Yeah.
But I think there's actually, in many ways, a real evolution in the last few years. We are not where we were 6 years ago. Okay. And maybe not where we'll be 6 years from now. And hopefully we get to a place where it could be, in many ways, mutual friendship and respect. I could not want to be married to him and want him to find happiness. Those two things are not contradictions. And to explain that to the viewing public is really hard.
Do you ever get into your son's viewpoint? Like, do you ever get to wonder and probe what life must mean for him with all this?
Yeah. I'm so grateful for this child of ours who is generally even-tempered, easygoing. I think for any child, what's being asked of him, which is to split time between two homes, is frustrating. Occasionally he forgets something, one place that he really needs, right, and he can't get. I think there are ways in which this has really been disruptive. He goes to a really small school and he wasn't having an experience that no one else in his classroom was having. He was the child with two homes and parents who are separated. And I think what I appreciate is that we have not put him in a position to have to decide who he loves and who he is aligned with. We don't pit him against each other. And I think that has made, I hope, the experience of this less about his alignment with either one of us and more about how he's feeling. And everything he has articulated about what would work for him in this arrangement, I think we have been sensitive to. He asked for very little, and he has otherwise been thriving in ways that I did not expect. It's hard for him. I know it is. Like, I think he was young enough that this is, since he's been online, this has been the reality. He doesn't have actually real memories of me and his dad being together anymore that I hear. I think it's really, in many ways, his way of being in the world is that he is open and accepting and flexible and kind and empathic, and I think loves me and his father deeply. And I think what I've created is a natural transnationalist, right? Where he's just very comfortable wherever he is. There isn't a place where you're going to drop this child. Sleepaway camp with his Auntie Seratu for 4 days. Wherever he is, he seems really comfortable and grounded and in himself, and he can make it, just find a space and be comfortable. I think the biggest heartbreak for me is if it was causing him undue distress or pain, and I listen for it closely. And right now, maybe it will emerge later, but right now I don't see any evidence that he's not thriving.
Let's talk about your work. Just in terms of your choice of a direction as career and what that has evolved to.
I love my job. I'm a counseling psychologist, and it is fitting. I couldn't have told you, even through my training, how much I would love what I do, because I didn't actually know what I would do with it. It just always felt like the direction. I was a psychology major in undergrad. I did a clinical psychology degree in graduate school, and I did a counseling psychology degree as a PhD. And so my entire academic existence has been in this space that is psychology. And I never really could tell you what the job would be because I didn't know any psychologists. I literally decided I wanted to study psychology because of an assignment I did at Hillcrest. We watched this movie, Ordinary People, and we're supposed to analyze every character. The guidance counselor at the time taught the class, and she called me into my office and she's like, have you heard about psychology? You wrote in this assignment, like you wrote. What was that about? And it was the first time I think an adult had ever said to me that I should consider something because I had a talent at it. I was just in many ways a kind of a student who did well across the board. I didn't have like a clear strength in math or clear strength in biology. I was just did everything. Okay, well, I didn't necessarily have a passion. And so somebody said to me, well, didn't consider psychology. Did something really well that stood out to me. And that was my entry into psychology. And so I have this job now where I teach and I research, and then I have a private practice where I see clients. And so I have this job uniquely where I do something different every single day. I interact with young people. I think it keeps me curious. It keeps me engaged. It keeps me energized. I love teaching. I think everything that I do well kind of comes together in teaching in a way that feels very natural to me. It doesn't feel like work. And when you're at work and it doesn't feel like work, it's a gift. You sometimes feel like you're being paid to play at what you like to do. So some aspects of the job are hard, but what I love about it is that I get to switch sets. I do something different every day. And because I am mostly working in a college, I get the warm months off. So I can be out in the sun and I can chill a little bit in the best months of the year. I feel so blessed in this job. I feel so lucky that I found it. I feel like I find meaning in it. I find purpose in it. I feel like I see a way in which I can evolve in it. And I enjoy enough of it that it doesn't feel like work. And so there's something that feels really exciting about it. There's some gratefulness to my parents for that, because that's unusual to be in Nigeria and your parents not telling you to do something really practical that you know is going to actually earn you a good living. The idea that they let me just do whatever, there wasn't clarity to me that you could, work in psychology and make a decent living at it. It was not my draw. I was just this idea of being able to read about the people who think about what makes humans grow, flourish, cause pain, be kind, be altruistic, self-destruct, like all of these people all through time, all across the world, who think these ideas and write them down, and being able to study that as my thing. Wow. And then what I do for a living is listen to people talk about, they trust me in this box to talk about their deepest everything, and trust that to me, greatest gift. I am constantly changed by the people who allow me in to their lives in that way. I feel really lucky. Absolutely just thrilled about the path that I am in terms of my career. The way I talk about it, the way I live it. I see the way my son experiences me as a professional, and his curiosity about it, and his pride about some of the things that I do. All of that is not a thing that I, in my wildest dreams, thought that I would experience. I feel very fulfilled in my career.
Yeah. I'm asking this because I saw some of the articles that you were involved in. Is there a particular point of view that this has in terms of an attention area for you in this work?
Yeah, I think for me, I think I talk about all of these, like in the beginning when I was studying psychology, it was all this conversation about Freud and Jung, mainly white men, right, who were pontificating on psychology. And I think when you do this long enough, you start to realize that psychology is everywhere. My Meshai on the corner in Jos was a psychologist.
I should point out that this is your traditional tea seller that gives you basically a hot breakfast. It would be bread and butter, and Meshai is a thing I think people should research about the streets in Nigeria.
Yes, the Meshai. You're doing your journalistic thing, which is providing people context. I appreciate you. Meshai on the corner was a psychologist. Everybody sat there in the morning and talked about what they were going to do. And he made conversation and understood people and offered people space. This idea that psychologists only exist in these highfalutin books was becoming nonsense to me. And I think part of the responsibility I feel as a Black woman psychologist is often to make that known, is to research the people who are under-researched in the space, mainly the ones who look like me. So I study African women, specifically on body image, because I felt like there was actually quite a bit of attention on my body growing up. Whether you had gained weight, there would be explicit statements about that. But I felt strangely oppressed growing up about my body in a way that I thought was really significant. And I know it was not unique to me. And so to be a researcher who can throw some light behind that and the experience of growing up in a way that I think women across the world can understand, but I think there's a particular way that it manifests in Nigeria uniquely that I think is also important to study. And I think that when you are of a particular cultural experience and you're an academic, you want to make that known. You want to research it and write about it. And so a lot of how I think about what I want to study is around my experiences. I have not yet been able to bring myself to study the experience of people with sickle cell. I think about it. It's on my list. But I honestly have not been able to bring myself to that because I mainly focus on mental health disparities writ large. And this would fit really beautifully into the work that I do. I wrote a conceptual paper on sickle cell as trauma a few years ago, but that's honestly the closest I've come into studying this particular experience that we started talking about at the top of this.
Well, when you look at a future from where you are now, and I think it will probably be based on our conversations in just two directions. The emotional direction, where it has to do with how you live with a partner, and also professional. What do you see? Like, where do you see that going?
I think you're finding me at a time where I'm feeling particularly optimistic and hopeful because we are in these summer months. Where do I see this going? You know, I think I am old enough that I understand that life comes with a lot of things. A lot of them we cannot control. To be well, I think I've always been this way, and I actually have to work on being in the future more, but I think I'm an in the moment person, which is I don't situate myself in the future and try and problem solve things in the future. I'm constantly telling my clients to be in the present. Anything could happen tomorrow that shifts all these things. But sometimes it is important to go ahead and envision some of your hopes for things. And I'm often reluctant to do that. And I think talking to you today, I think maybe it has something to do with this fear that sometimes that being in the future might mean something for us as a family that's very different from other people because we're dealing with sickness. So you are in the moment and you're grabbing the moment that you have daily because tomorrow, not promised. I have an amazing partner right now that, you know, is teaching me like I've told you, teaching me to not compartmentalize, to not be superwoman, to rely. Part of the contention in our relationship is that he's in the future. He's like, can we talk about what we are gonna do? I think part of it is that after you come out of a marriage that did not work, there's a part of you that's fearful about diving headfirst into the next one. And I think that there is some hesitation that he feels from me sometimes about really planning and being in it fully. And I think he deserves for me to engage in with my full chest and be in the future. And if I'm pressed, of course I have hopes. I want to be in a full partnership again, to try at a lifelong relationship again that doesn't fail, and to trust myself not to be. I think there's a part of me that feels like I'm a line mine and I blow things up and I feel like that's what happened. Even though I know is not the truth of what happens. I have hopes I joke all the time that I imagine myself teaching into my old age and slumping at the lectern. That's how I want to go. Horrifies my partners. What do you mean? We need to retire. But to feel that good about what you do, such that that's how you want to go out, I feel optimistic about that. It's not this ambitious piece where I want to rule the American Psychological Association or anything like that. I bet I want to consistently feel challenged and pushed towards the things that I want. And there's no brighter part of my future visioning that does not include my son and all the things I hope for him and his life. Everything that I'm about right now is about thinking about how to parent with clarity, with wisdom, with intentionality, with grace, because I'm not perfect and I'm flawed.
Nika, thank you very much.
Some stories stay with us, not because they ended, but because they never really did. This is Echoes and Parables.